coming here as a child to see the fireworks over the lake, so that was always a fun thing for us to do. I've had a very amazing life with a lot of great opportunities in front of me. After I graduated from Wanamingo, I went to Mankato State. While I was there, I enrolled in the ROTC program, and that's how I got my commission. That started a 28-year career that I had no idea was going to happen, but I'm excited about the adventure that it took me on. My first professional job was out in Washington, D.C. I worked for Tim Penny. Some of you may remember Tim. He was our congressman for a number of years. When he was there, I got interested in the foreign ag and hunger issues as that relates to national security. I think that's super important. That took me on to get a master's at West Texas A&M out of Canyon. While there, I joined the Oklahoma National Guard, which again was another amazing opportunity for me. I went into Peace Corps. I came home from Peace Corps. My dad had a massive stroke a week after I came home. This was a big formative thing for me, which I didn't even realize at the time. I came to learn the value of good insurance as the bills were huge. And then also, as we worked with my dad over the years with his stroke, the value of long-term care close to home. There is nothing that drives home the value of being able to have your loved ones close to you than having to be your own parents and people that you love. Another thing is then I went on to Afghanistan, came back, worked at the Oklahoma Military Department on the state side. I ran the school. Well, I didn't run the school, that's a misstatement. I was the director of the Youth Programs Division for the Oklahoma Military Department, and that showed me the importance of our schools. There's been a bunch of different things that have gone on, but I just want to talk to you quick about two things that are super important to me and the whole reason I'm running. One is our long-term care. Like I said, I've lived it with my father. With my job that I have now, I've been able to see a little bit of what's going on the licensing side, and I firmly believe that there are things that we can do to strengthen the foundation upon which our nursing homes exist. If I didn't believe it, I wouldn't be sitting here. The second thing is, as a public school graduate, I believe in our public schools. I'm hearing on how they're struggling financially. I've talked to school administrators. I firmly believe if we stop the partisan politics and listen to them, we can solve their issues and make them stronger. I believe in our public schools, I believe in our communities, and I believe in you. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Next is Pam Altendorf. You now have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone, and I want to say a thank you to the Women's Club of Lake City and the Lake City Chamber for hosting this tonight, and for all of you participating so that you have a better idea of the candidates running and participating in the election process here. It's very important to us here in the state of Minnesota. I am Pam Altendorf. I am the current state representative of this beautiful District 20A. I ran for the first time politically in the year 2022, so I'm a first-time incumbent. I just finished what everyone in Minnesota would call a historical year in the state. It was indeed historical. It was historical spending. We entered the session in 2023 with a $19 billion surplus in the state of Minnesota. It was gone, it was spent, and the campaign promises to return that to the taxpayers was not done by the Democrat Party. We also, the state of Minnesota, the Democrats raised the taxes $10 billion. We are now looking at a state budget that went from $52 billion to $72 billion, and that is a 40% increase. Most people that are conservative or common sense people understand that your paychecks have not increased 40% over the last 2 years, and yet that is what happened to the Minnesota state government, and it is unsustainable. Most experts looking out see that we are coming to a deficit in the next 2 years. So I'm a Republican running for re-election, and this last 2 years, as I said, was a Democrat trifecta where the Democrats controlled all portions of our government. And yet when I'm out talking to people at the doors, people in the community, I believe that we all agree on about 80% of everything. We all want safe streets, we want to reduce crime, we want to support our law enforcement. As a mother of 5 and a grandma of one, I worry about our future. I worry about our education. The state of Minnesota, we went from being one of the top-rated states in the nation for education, and now recently we're ranked number 19. That should not be acceptable to anyone. And yet the Democrats passed a $2.2 billion record new funding to our schools, and our schools are worse off today than what they were. I grew up on a farm, and I know this is an important agricultural community. I worry about the regulations of our farmers, and I worry about them leaving. As a business owner, I have seen what the state has done to small business. I worry about the regulations, the taxes, and the permitting, and we need to become a more business-friendly state. So I'm running for re-election, and I am looking for common sense laws in the future to work so that we can maintain our freedom.
Thank you, Pam.
Next, 2 questions were selected by our committee for each candidate's response. You will each have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Question 1 is for Heather. In estimation, what are the 2 most pressing issues facing local school districts today? What actions could the state legislature take, if any, to set the table for rectifying these issues?
So thank you very much. I'm excited to answer this question because I've been focusing on this. This is one of the things that's really important to me. I've been talking with school administrators, I've been talking with teachers, trying to understand from their perspective, from the perspective of the subject matter experts, what's going on, because it's important that we listen to the folks who actually do the job. And what I'm hearing over and over again is part of the problem has to do with how the money is earmarked when it comes to them. The schools have a lot of needs, and our administrators know where they need to use the funding. One of the things I think we can do and should do is relook at the funding formula and how things are earmarked. When they know that they need something, we need to be able to give them the latitude with the funds that they have to do the work that they need. Another aspect that I have been hearing about is the READ Act, and it went through with an intention to focus on the science of teaching, to bring up the scores of kids and to help them to read better. But teachers weren't involved and administrators were not really involved in the conversation and in the process for how this happened. And so now we have a situation where they're working to try and execute the law as it was written, but it's not really meeting their need and it's adding another financial burden. And this goes back to what I said before. We need to listen to our subject matter experts and we need to get them properly engaged and fully engaged when we're making these decisions that relate to them, because they know what they need and they know where it needs to go. And lastly, I'm finding that there's a lot of folks who have concerns about how our special education and IEPs are funded. There's supposed to be a commitment from the federal government that's not being fully met, and this is creating a burden on our schools. And those kids, they need to have the proper teaching and they need to have the proper support that they need. So when elected, Rachel, you should expect me to knock on your door because we need to get that fixed.
Thank you. Question 1 for Pam. And I know you both mentioned school, so this is also a school question. Statewide testing results for high schools in 20A are declining to the point that most school results are below the state proficiency level. What are your priorities for improving the academic results for the 5 high schools in this legislative district?
Thank you for that question. I currently serve on the Education Finance Committee, so I have seen most of these bills that have come through the House, and it's very concerning to see the decline in test scores. In fact, as I'm sitting in the committee, I knew going into 2023 that we were already seeing declining test scores. This was, of course, after COVID. And I know some people say that this is because of COVID, but it's really not true. Because as I mentioned earlier, we went from number 3 to number 19. Every other state had COVID as well. So we have to have an honest conversation about why is Minnesota dropping so quickly below other states. And what I'm seeing is we're not prioritizing education We have to get back to the basics of academics. When I have talked to teachers and administrators, like I said, we had record funding, 2.2 billion record funding in 2023, and yet in 2024, we saw the headlines, $100 million deficit for Minneapolis schools. Red Wing is looking at a $2 million deficit. How can we put that much money into our public education and we're looking at deficits and we're looking at 50% of our children can't read at grade level, which is a disgrace for our children because we're not setting them up for success for the future. And that's because we have misplaced priorities. Right now in 2023, we passed record funding. We also passed 65 mostly unfunded mandates. And that is really the problem, is that the people in St. Paul are writing blanket legislation that you here in Lake City have to follow, that they also are following in Minneapolis, that they're also following in Goodhue. And we need to give local control back to our school boards, back to our administrators, so the dollars can go straight to the classrooms and supporting our students where it needs to be.
Thank you. The next set of questions, first one is for Heather. What is your view on requiring voter identification? How do you feel about non-citizens voting, and how will you restore trust in the system?
Thank you for asking me that question. So first of all, let's be super clear. Non-citizens don't vote, right? They don't. They're not allowed to register. They're not registering. They're not getting past our poll workers. Non-citizens are not voting. One of the ways, though, I think that we do need to restore integrity into our election is we need to take an honest, sincere look at what's going on with the intent to make people feel that our elections are not secure. If I was just reading, because I was reading the Homeland Security Emergency Management Threat Assessment, the National Threat Assessment, and that's not a liberal bastion. Don't let anybody fool you into thinking it is. And they've been able to clearly identify that it is the intent of outside actors to discredit our elections, to sow discord within our country. When people repeat these lies that our elections are not secure, what they're doing is they're repeating the lies of our foreign adversaries. And what the foreign adversaries are doing, they're taking the folks who are most disgruntled and they are pushing their buttons, for lack of a better phrase, to try and make them be more agitated. They watched what happened on January 6th of 2 years ago. 4 years ago. They've been watching and they've been working. And it's called domestic violent extremists is the term that is used within the security world. And they are able to see, our national security experts are able to see how these groups are getting agitated, and they're able to see that they're planning to do stuff or possibly planning to do stuff, and they're being spurred upon by these foreign entities who are working to undermine our elections. We should not fall prey to that. If an election happens and we don't like the results, which happens to half of the country, that's just how the election goes.
Thank you. And the second question for Pam. What was the piece of legislation that Minnesota residents benefited the most from?
Oh, thank you for that question. So yeah, being in the triple minority in the state of Minnesota, I would say for the last 2 years was very difficult. There was not a lot of bipartisan work going on. There was not a lot of working together or, I think most people in Minnesota, you have this concept that we're working together. And that was the most disappointing thing that I saw was even though I knew I was in the minority in the House, and it's a matter of math, there's 70 Democrats, 64 Republicans. So I knew at the end of the day the Democrats' legislation would get passed. What I was very disappointed about was to see the lack of working together, where common sense amendments were offered on bill after bill after bill to bring our bills to the middle, and they were refused. They were rejected because it really truly was just a one-way show the last 2 years in Minnesota. That's what I think is disappointing. The legislation that I would say is most important publicly to Lake City, to other places, and I voted no to this, was bonding. And I'll explain to you. When we're bonding for projects like infrastructure, those are needed things, roads, bridges. We saw the dam over by Mankato fail because that's a major infrastructure project that was neglected. So I do believe in funding infrastructure, and that comes back to the local communities. It creates local jobs, and I do think that's part of our job. The reason why I voted no to that bill was because the Democrats put $183 million of nonprofit spending into our bonding bill. And to me, that's wrong, because your tax dollars should not be putting in a bonding situation where we're paying interest to nonprofits.
Thank you, both of you candidates. Appreciate it.